Assalamu alaikum everyone. Jazakallah khair for joining today. My name is Safi Hussein and I will be your moderator today. Today's prime time is for parents. It's parent talk and we're going to be talking about ADHD. Before we start, we have a couple of announcements while we wait for other people to join. And inshallah khair, basically we want to talk about all the other programs that Muslim Children of North America offer. We offer a variety of programs throughout the year, and some of them are prime time. This is a once a month free program addressing current topics and trends for kids. Last week's prime time is an example we've had, and we're doing something similar for parents like today. MCNA also offers youth courses during spring and fall. And this coming program is actually about social media. We do ask you to register. It is $25 per student or $35 per family. These courses are made for children ages 10 and up. Next, we also have our own publication. We have a children's magazine called Companion. A Companion is a magazine for kids, written by kids all over the United States. So if your kids are creative or good at writing, please send their writings at companion@icna.org. Now, we have another publication called Me and My Quran, which is a short study of Quranic surahs with tafsirs and images. This is a great book. We have, the book 1 and book 3, which just go over the first few juz's and the last juz. And you can purchase this from MCNA YMj.org. Alhamdulillah. Now, we have MCNA YMj chapters and regions all over United States. As you guys can see, we have, from New York to Santa Clara, Maryland, Houston, Dallas. You can reach out for more information at our website, which is www.mcnaymj.org. Now, the best thing for us to know what we are doing is by following our social media websites. Our MCNA YMj YouTube channel is a great resource to watch our program recordings, such as this one and others for our children. Make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you're notified of when new videos are uploaded, and also like and follow our Facebook and Instagram pages. We advertise all the different programs that are happening there with the details and updates. Now, inshallah, we will be beginning with Quran Tilawa, and after that we will jump into the program. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. As you guys all know, today's program is about ADHD. And often when we think about something and we think about that we know it too well, it's time to step back and take a new perspective on the topic. This ADHD Awareness Month challenges us to look at what we thought we knew and develop a better and newer understanding of ADHD signs and symptoms and how we can help and support our children as such, right? We don't need to struggle alone in this feature. It is something that is common, and now there are many resources out there to help children's, adults, families alike, right? And I am really excited to talk about today's speaker. Her name is Sister Madiha Haroon. She has a master's degree, MS in marriage and family therapy from Northern Illinois University. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a licensed clinical professional counselor and a certified drug and alcohol counselor with over 17 years of clinical experience. She is level 2 EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing trained. She is also trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, mindfulness, exposure response prevention, and attachment theory. Additionally, she has completed the externship and advanced training in EFT, emotionally focused couples therapy, which is a well-researched and effective modality to increase safety and connection in relationship. And so, alhamdulillah, she has graciously have accepted today's topic to talk about ADHD and how it affects our children, how it affects us, how it affects our families, and how we can work together creating a better, successful, productive environment for us all. So inshallah khair, Sister Madiha, I will turn this over to you. You may share your screen and then mute yourself.
Can you guys see my screen?
We can see your screen.
All right, perfect. Okay, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the great team that you guys have at MCNA to arrange all these amazing programs on a monthly basis. I'm honored to be here to talk about a topic that is also really dear to my heart, since I see so many adolescents and adults struggling with ADHD, and many of them have been struggling or are struggling, and people don't quite understand what the diagnosis really means. So it's wonderful to be here. So I know we have a chat format, so I'm not just gonna be able to see it. So I'm just curious, even before I begin, you don't have to write it, and you can even just think about the answers at your own end too. When you think about ADHD, what comes to your mind? What's the first word that comes up? What's the image that comes up? Maybe it's somebody that you know that comes up. Maybe you come up. Right? So because for many people, ADHD is a very confusing diagnosis because a lot of things seems really inconsistent. People wonder, how come, they're able to do and like play video games all day or read a book all day, but they can't get their homework in? Why do they cannot just, sit still as I'm talking to them? When I talk to them, why are they not listening to me? Because a lot of times people don't understand ADHD, the name itself could be pretty deceiving. It says attention deficit hyperactivity. Deficit means they don't have the ability to pay attention, when in reality it's the opposite. People with ADHD have a tendency of paying attention to just not one thing, but to many, many, many things at one time. Whereas somebody who does not have a diagnosis, you present them with one thing, they can focus on that one thing. Somebody with an ADHD diagnosis, at any given moment, they're thinking about 4 to 5 different things. So they're always, the internal system is the one that is active. They're always thinking about many different things at any given time. So in reality, they don't have a short attention span. They have the ability to pay attention to many different things at a given time. So what we call an ADHD system, because when I say a system, I mean their nervous system and their brain system, it is programmed and differently than somebody who does not have an ADHD system. So it is very much of a neurological, biological medical condition, meaning the nervous system is different. It tends to be a little bit more hyper aroused, which means everything gets to be a little bit more active than somebody who doesn't. So what we would consider somebody who doesn't have ADHD to have an atypical symptoms, neurosystem, meaning it's normal, it's typical to a lot of people, whereas ADHD system is called neurodiverse. It's different. It's not better or worse, it's just different. It's like if somebody was left-handed, it doesn't make them better or worse than somebody who's right-handed. It simply means they're left-handed. They're going to have different challenges. They may learn over time to use their right hand, but their preference would always be their left hand. Similarly, with somebody with ADHD, it doesn't mean with anything you can change their brain system or their nervous system. It simply means they will learn to manage their symptoms in a different way. Hence, we have to remember that, and we have to, as parents, need to be learned to parent them in a different way too. So their system, unlike somebody who doesn't have an ADHD system, has the ability, as I said, to focus on many different things at a time, which means it is a system that is very much geared towards an interest-based system. If something is interesting, they will focus on it. If something is intriguing or challenging, or just something that's like a novel, something new, they will gravitate towards it. And once that novelty wears off, their system sort of shuts down. They don't really care much for it. Hence, people don't understand, you could do this, and now suddenly you have no desire to. Right? You read this book, you started the book, and you couldn't wait to put it down. And then once you finished it, you don't really care to reread it because they got to the ending, they know how the book ended, they lost interest. So it's very much of that interest-based brain. So once they get started, they've got to finish it. Once they finish it, their interest goes off. Their brains also have a tendency to be really, really sensitive to rejection. And that's going to be really important as we talk a lot about it today. They are hyper alert, and you can keep hearing me say the word hyper alert, hyper aroused, because their systems, their nervous system is always more alive than somebody who doesn't have ADHD. So everything is felt more, expressed more. So even rejection or criticism is felt more by them. They actually have a label that's I should just say a category, I could just say it's called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which means they are really, really aware of how others see them. So when somebody doesn't approve of them or somebody has a negative view of them, they feel that pain much more than somebody who does not have ADHD. So they tend to become people pleasers. They tend to be afraid of failing, and they really don't want to let mom and dad down. So they try their best to work really hard to make sure that they're happy. But they know that their brains are in a way that they get to be having trouble with focusing and attention. They may act without thinking. So they have this constant sense that, oh man, I'm letting my mom and dad down, or I'm failing. So they tend to end up believing a lot of those things, which ends up affecting them in more ways than somebody who doesn't have ADHD. So I thought I'll ask you guys, I'm not sure if anybody would have access to see the next part, which is going to be like a quiz for you guys in a way, because I wanted to see how much do you know about ADHD. So I'm going to just go through these facts or myths. Either you can write them in the chat if you have access to that, or if not, you can just think about the answers that you're on, true and false. ADHD is a real medical disorder. It is true. The reason we can say it is a medical disorder or not a mental health disorder, because it's a neural, it's like I said, they have done studies where they have studied brain scans and MRIs. And what that found is that the brain chemistry of somebody who has ADHD versus who does not have ADHD, their brain scans look really different. So parts of the brain that needs to be a little bit more active for attention and emotional control tends to be less active with somebody with ADHD. Whereas the part of the brain, the frontal part, which is right by your forehead, which is called the prefrontal cortex, it tends to be a little bit underactive. This is the part of the brain that is used for decision making, impulse control. So they struggle with that. And they had found that these brain scans are valid with ages, with different ethnicities, with different genders. This is how an ADHD brain is just different than somebody who does not have an ADHD brain. Also, they have found people with ADHD have different levels of chemicals that are needed in our body for emotional regulation, for attention, such as dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. Their levels are not the same as somebody with a non-ADHD nervous system. So it is not considered a mental health disorder, ADHD. It is considered a biological medical disorder. Hence, is treated that way as well. All right, next one. People with ADHD just cannot concentrate. They just need to work a little bit more. That is false. People with ADHD really work hard trying to do the best that they can. A lot of them actually are extremely hardworking, kids and adults. A lot of times they tend to put in more hours. They may put in more hours doing their homework. So it's not their fault that their brain isn't helping them, because their brain is functioned and regulated differently. I had a client, he was in second, third grade, and this is many years ago, but to this day I remember we were doing some activity and I was just asking him about school. And he looked up almost with this really sad eyes. And to this day, I remember his eyes because they were so sad. And he said, is homework supposed to be hard? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, I come home and then, soon after I see all my friends, they go out and they're playing because they're done with their homework. And I'm still sitting there with my mom doing homework because it's so hard for me. This little boy would just struggle doing basic math and English, just even writing letters. It was really hard. Many kids even struggle with just with fine motor skills. So handwriting gets to be really tough for them, but they work hard because they want to make sure that they're getting it. So a lot of them, it's not about that they cannot, that they don't want to concentrate, that they're just having a really hard time with concentration. Next one, people with ADHD just need more discipline. That is false. That's a myth. ADHD, it is not caused by bad parenting by any means. It's not like they need more discipline or more consequences. Their brains are different. The nervous system is different. They should just need a different kind of discipline. But it doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means their system is wired in a different way and they need different resources. ADHD affects boys and girls. True or false? It is true. It affects both genders. It looks different in boys than it looks than in girls. With boys, you may see more of that, the behaviors that we tend to associate with ADHD, like that squirming behavior, that hyperactivity, like being on the go, like being on high energy. With girls, it looks a little bit different. Their energy level shows up in a different way. So that's why a lot of times girls get to be undiagnosed or get to be diagnosed later in life. So I'm just going to skip over for just a moment. With girls, it ends up showing up as them just daydreaming. They may, look out their window, they're just staring at it and they're just sort of lost. You're talking and they have no clue because their mind is going in different directions. Their hyperactivity shows up as talking for many girls, like, so they're called the chatty girls in the room because they're talking to everybody around them. They're standing in the lunch line and they're talking to the person in front of them, in the back of them, and 10 girls down. They want to talk to everybody. And a lot of them tend to have this desire to do really well, these perfectionistic tendencies. So what happens is, if they have a homework due and they didn't do it in time, right? Like they wait till the last minute, which happens a lot with ADHD, with the procrastination because an interest-based system. So they may put it off because now suddenly this is an urgency, right? Their challenge, hence the system becomes active and now they're ready to do the work. A boy may be like, just do the bare minimum and see this is good enough. The girl will be like, nope, I've got to do this right. I have this pressure to do well. I want to show my parents I can be a good student. I want to show my teachers that I'm a good student. So they may stay up all night long, getting anxious, trying to get the work done. So they have this desire to please everybody. Those perfectionistic tendencies tend to show up more in girls than in boys at that time. With girls, it shows up as they may have really trouble maintaining relationship. Girls' relationships require a lot about learning social cues, learning to read nonverbals, and they're not always very good at that. So they may blurt out something, they may interrupt in the middle of conversations, which just does not go well with other girls many times. Or they may have a hard time complimenting because they're not thinking about that. They say something, they move on to something else. So other girls may not like being with them, which adds on to them feeling as if I'm doing something wrong, something is wrong with me, and they start believing it. They may forget things, which could be problematic in those relationships as well. So with girls, it just shows up differently than it does with boys. So girls is a little bit more that inattentive factor, their hyperactivity is a little bit different. So we just need to be aware it's just different, but it is present in girls as it is in boys. The next one, a child that can play video games and can read books cannot have ADHD. That is a false. Like I said, their system is interest-based. There's a phenomena that is associated with ADHD. It is called hyperfocusing. When ADHD brain likes something, they can focus on it. In a typical day, an ADHD child can focus and zone into something about 4 to 5 times a day. Let's suppose they find something really interesting, and for those moments, their brain is working as if it had no deficit. They're not aware of the environment around them. They're completely focused. It's new, it's challenging, it's interest-based, and they want to get it. So in those moments, they're completely attuned to that thing that they're doing. So they can read a book for 30 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe all night long. But then if they have no interest in math, you have them do a math homework, suddenly their brain shuts down and they cannot do that math problem because they get overwhelmed in their system at that time. Next one, adults can have ADHD. That is very true. It is a neurodevelopmental disorder, which means you don't always age out. So it is very common for adults to have it. It's about 85% of the children who have ADHD ends up having it in adulthood. Many of them may or may not have been diagnosed as a child. So if they have not been diagnosed, they may not even know, hence they've never received treatment. So the average is only about 1 in 4 adults end up seeking treatment. So you may have a lot of adults that are going around that they have never had treatment. They may not even know they have ADHD, but they've just learned to believe that something is wrong with them because their system feels overwhelming because they're always on alert, always active, and they have no idea what is going on with them. Next one. Children who take ADHD medication can get addicted to their medications and are more likely to abuse drugs or alcohol. This actually is false. Untreated ADHD is more likely to lead to abusing of drugs and alcohol. And the reason for that is when somebody is medicated, it means you're able to help their nervous system be a little bit more in balance. So it's not as overwhelming for them. Because a lot of people with ADHD find their system to be overwhelmed. They're always on the go on the inside. So a lot of them may have a hard time sitting still, may have a hard time going to sleep at night, may have a hard time managing their emotions. So they may turn to drugs or alcohol to calm their system down, and they're more likely to get addicted. And with ADHD medications, if it's prescribed based upon that person and they're used based upon that person, the way they're supposed to be used, there is very low chances of them getting addicted. Instead, it could have a lot of benefit in helping them focus, especially and pay attention, especially for school and work. The parts of the brain that are hyperactive, they could be a little bit more calmed down. And the parts of the brain that we need to pay attention and focus, they get to be a little bit more active in those medications, and they could help balance some of the brain chemistry. People with ADHD use it as an excuse for their behaviors. That is false. That's a myth. Most people with ADHD, like I said, have after hearing all of these things from parents or teachers or other people that, hey, what's wrong with you? Why can't you just sit still? Why do you have to get up and get going? Why can't you pay attention? Why can't you listen? Tends up having a lot of shame about their behavior. They end up believing these things that I am not good. I'm not a good student. My brother, my sister is better. My cousin is better. I am not good at school. And since they have a fear of failure because of that, they may not even try new things. So they don't use it as an excuse for their behaviors. They're just struggling. And they do not even have the vocabulary just to explain what's happening with them unless you give them that vocabulary. I was working with another student a long time ago. He was in kindergarten, first grade, and he knew his diagnosis, but didn't quite know what it meant. He just knew he took medications for ADHD because his was on the higher end of the spectrum of the hyperactivity factor. He would just say, yep, nobody wants to play with me because I just tend to, say things and do things. He was already taking in the belief system that something was wrong with him and nobody wanted to be friends with him. So a lot of kids with ADHD tends to struggle with self-esteem issues, with depression, with anxiety because of these reasons. Having ADHD is serious. True or false? It is true. Having ADHD and not getting it treated is extremely serious. Having it alone is not a big deal, but if it's untreated, it could cause a lot of issues. It could cause issues with their social problems, with problems at school, with problems on their playground for the kids. And as you get to be an adult, problems at work or even in their own homes and their own marriages with parenting. So it could have a lot of implications if ADHD goes untreated. So when you think about ADHD, you may really think of just a few things, right? Like they can't focus, they're a little bit more fidgety, but you got to keep in mind, it's like an iceberg, right? When you look at an iceberg, you only see a little bit above the water, but most of the ice is underneath the water. And that is what it's like with somebody with ADHD. You may just see a few things and you may not realize how much of that stuff is going underneath, how much they're struggling, right? Because many of these kids, they don't know what's going on. They just know they're having a lot of struggles with, right? They don't understand why they have a hard time going to sleep, because a lot of people with ADHD, like I said, are thinking about 4 to 5 things at a given moment. So imagine you're putting them to bed, and now suddenly you're supposed to go to sleep, meaning your mind has to sort of slow down, able to let go of your day and wind down and sleep. Their minds can't do that. They don't know how to slow their minds down. So they may have what we call like racing thoughts. So it's hard for them to slow down and get some sleep. So it is not uncommon for ADHD individuals or kids or adults to have a hard time going to sleep. And many times, for many of them, they may even get up middle of the night because something wakes them up. And if something wakes them up, they have a hard time going back to sleep. So the sleep is disrupted. Hence, they're tired the next day. And now, in addition to the nervous system being different, they have tiredness as well. They may have a really hard time just remembering basic things at times, right? So they're struggling with memory. So I'll give you an example. Imagine like, a 14-year-old, freshman in high school. It's a weekend and you tell your 14-year-old to go up, hey, your room's really messy today. Why don't you go up, make your bed, put your clothes away, put your books and toys away, and bring your laundry down. And you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and your 14-year-old is nowhere to be seen. It's been 30 minutes, could be 40 minutes. You finally go up, you're angry, you've screamed their name a few times and no response. It's like, what's going on? You go up, you just see them in great, they're reading a book or they're doing something else. Their bed is made, but nothing else is done. What happened was they went up with the full intention of doing all of them, but they have poor memory, right? They have a hard time remembering everything. The executive function is really difficult for them, right? Executive functioning, different things fall in that category, and one of them is self-control. One of them is time management. One of them is start a task and then to complete it. So they go up with the full intention of doing all of them. They made their bed and then they saw something, right? I call it like the next shiny thing. And then that captured their attention and they forgot about the other 3 things they were supposed to do. So intentions were there. They always want to do well. But because of the way their brains are structured, they have a hard time remembering those things. So they forget that. The same thing, they struggle with time management. Their sense of time is different. The nervous system doesn't quite help them, It's like they either tend to overestimate how much it will take them or they underestimate, right? They're doing homework. You ask them, oh, how long is it going to take you? Oh, 20 minutes, I'll be done. Not realizing writing 3 paragraphs is not a 20-minute thing. It may take you 3 hours to do, but they tend to overestimate or underestimate their abilities to do certain things. So they don't have a perception of what time is. So having really poor time management skills. They really struggle with relationships, like I talked about, right? If they're going to be impulsive, they're going to say things, do things without thinking. A lot of ADHD kids and adults may struggle with impulse control, meaning they act without thinking. They say things without thinking it through, which gets them into trouble with family, with friends, with kids in the playground. So they're going to struggle making friends and maintaining those friendships. They may have a hard time managing their emotions, right? When something doesn't go your way, you may get upset, but then you get over it pretty fast. For them, it's not the same thing. They're hyper aroused, right? I said, you keep hearing me use the word hyper aroused. The nervous system is hyper aroused. It's a differently wired nervous system. So when they feel that anger, when something doesn't go their way, you don't get a little bit of anger, you're going to get a lot of anger. If they feel sad about that, they're going to really feel sad about it. That's why at times for them to transition from one activity to the other, it's so difficult, right? If they're watching a TV show and you say, okay, time to go, time for bed, and you just close the TV, a lot of times you're going to get a temper tantrum because suddenly you just went from thing A to thing B and they weren't ready for that. They get emotionally dysregulated, meaning they don't know how to control their emotions, and they're going to have an outburst in that moment. So they're going to throw a temper tantrum, they're going to have a hard time. And a lot of times that is really difficult for parents because they don't quite know what to do in those moments. So, but we have to remember they are trying to do their best with the nervous system that is so different than somebody who does not have, sorry about that. I think something went wrong with my, so now I'm trying to get back. Here we go. Their nervous system is much different than somebody who does not have ADHD. So we talked about how much it's, like I said, it's one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorder in kids. It's about 1 in 10 kids has been diagnosed with ADHD. Some suspect it's even more because a lot of times it doesn't get diagnosed till later in life. And about 5% of the adults, they do believe that for adults it is very underrepresented because some adults haven't been diagnosed as kids, and only 1 in 4 adults receive treatment. So a lot of the adults may be struggling with forgetfulness, time management, organization, which could show up in their marriages, in their parenting, in their work. And a lot of kids and adults, they may suffer silently, not really knowing what's going on. They just know they just struggle. What others find really easy to do, like that kid that I had mentioned, that 7-year-old that's struggling with their math and English homework. What is easy for you and me may not be easy for somebody with ADHD. So having to keep that in mind, they are struggling not because they want to, it's because their nervous system and their brains are wired much differently. I keep mentioning the self-esteem because it is so true. A lot of kids with ADHD tend to struggle with self-esteem because they tend to keep hearing in ways that they're failing, in ways that they're not doing well, how their behaviors are not acceptable, how what they're doing isn't good. Why can't you do what your brother is doing? Why can't you do what your sister is doing? So they tend to start believing that I'm going to fail. Why even bother? They believe that they're not good enough, right? I hear it a lot from my adolescents, right? They have really believed it that my ADHD, if they have the diagnosis, some of them, they don't even have a diagnosis. I had a 20-some-year-old come through my office struggling with college, was failing classes. High school they did great in. High school had a lot of structure. They were able to flourish. They got to college and suddenly they were on their own and they were struggling to meet the deadlines. They kept missing. They kept forgetting what assignments were due. They won't get that energy, the desire to do their work. And they really believed that they were not meant for college. They think I'm not going to be good enough. You know, my sister, my brother, they can do it, but I'm not meant for college. College isn't meant for me. And then we had to do an assessment to see if they had ADHD, and they met almost all the criteria. And once they're able to get on the right medications and get other behaviors in place, they were able to get a sense it wasn't them. It was the ADHD. It was their brain chemistry, their nervous system that made it difficult. You have a list of people in front of you. I don't know if you know any of them, but I'm going to go through them. Like I said, a lot of people have ADHD. We don't even realize their abilities to do things. It is amazing. Their brains are different. I said different, not better or worse. Most ADHD people have this amazing ability to be creative. They come up with original ideas. Their brains are thinking about 4 to 5 things at a given moment. So their brains are always going, imagine how many ideas are coming into their brain. And like I said, they have the ability to focus on something. When they do, everything sort of fades away, that hyper focus. A lot of times when people do that for stuff that they love, they excel in it because they can put in their complete attention, focus, and energy into what they love doing. So they excel in their choice of career at that moment. Many ADHD people have this amazing ability to get along with people because as they get older, they have less inhibitions, right? They have a little bit more impulse control issues, which means they also have less inhibitions. They can learn to get along with people many times. So they have this warmth, this ability just, befriend everybody, have amazing ability to personalize it and create relationships. And many of them are extremely hardworking. They've had to work really hard since kids because in order to keep up with their peers, with their, kids in school, they had to work sometimes twice as hard. So they're extremely persistent, hardworking. They don't give up. They have amazing determination. When something gets tough and challenging, somebody who has an atypical brain may give up. They get energized by it. That's what activates their brain. So they love a challenge. And these are just some examples. You can Google, you're going to come across many different names of many famous people who have ADHD and have been an amazing success in their chosen field. So I'm just going to go down the list. I'm going to see if you know any of them or not, or maybe you know some of them, but not all. So John F. Kennedy was a president. He has ADHD. Bill Gates, Microsoft. He dropped out of college, but guess what? His ADHD brain allowed him to do something that was far more amazing. Lisa Ling, she is a correspondent for both CNN and National Geographic. She makes a lot of documentaries. She openly talks about her ADHD struggles and how her ADHD enables her to do the work that is amazing with CNN and these documentaries that she makes that are absolutely beautiful. Michael Phelps, he's an Olympic gold medalist for swimming, has several medals. He openly talks about his ADHD and depression. Simone Biles, she's an Olympic gymnast who openly, I think she was diagnosed in her early teens, I want to say. Justin Timberlake, he's an entertainer plus an entrepreneur. Again, he uses his ADHD to do something that he can really excel in. Catherine Ellison, she is an award-winning writer. She has won several international prizes for reporting. She is a journalist. She has a TED Talk on ADHD, and I think she has a book / a movie and a video on ADHD as well. Openly talks about her struggles and how her ADHD enabled her to do this amazing reporting as a journalist. She can really focus when she's doing her work. Richard Branson, he is the founder and the owner of Virgin Airlines. Again, they all use their creativity and their brains and their abilities to focus on things that they love to do, interest-based system, to do what they love and excel in their chosen field. So what are some of the common ADHD symptoms? So some of the common symptoms in general are inattention. Like I said, they have a hard time paying attention. It's not like they cannot pay attention, it's just that they're paying attention to many things at a given time, which makes them hard to focus. So it could always be seen, even as parents, they may say, I'm talking to my child, and they're sort of looking elsewhere, they're not even listening. Chances are they're listening to you, but part of their brain, and the other parts are thinking about something else. So maybe what you would need to do is literally get down on their eye level, capture their attention, maybe hold their face gently, say, hey, honey, can you listen to me? I have something really important to say to you, and then say it. You are in their right there in terms of their interest-based brain at that time, right? You have your attention, they have your attention, and then they can really fully pay attention to what you have to say. They struggle with time management, impulse control, exaggerated emotion, that hyperarousal comes in, hyperfocus, interest-based system, that hyperactivity, and then executive dysfunction. Executive dysfunction, what it means is everybody has these functions that we have to sort of get through in life with, right? And they struggle with some of them. I'm just going to give you a few examples of what that is, like working memory. When you have to remember to do things, I have to do A, B, C, D, E today. They struggle with that. They may struggle with task initiation. You give them, a math homework, and they're sitting there because they don't know how to start the task. They just need some cues, some guidance to help them remember how to do that. They may have a hard time organizing and planning how to finish a task. There are about 13 of them. I won't go through all of them right now in the interest of time, but you can easily look them up if you type them up. Executive dysfunction, there's a quizzes online you can find both for kids and also for adults to see which one are your child's strengths and which one are your child's weaknesses. Every ADHD child has some strengths, and every one of them would have a weakness. So it's about how do I use their strengths to help with their weakness. Some kids may be better with managing their emotions than other kids. Some kids may have a better time initiating a task than others. Some may have a better time with planning than others. So it's about finding out what is your child's strength, because I guarantee you they have a handful of those very easily. So it's about finding what they are and using them to help them with their weaknesses. So you can balance those off. So there are three main categories when you think about ADHD. If somebody was to show up in my office, I would want to see which one they fall under. Either they have the more of that hyperactive, impulsive kind, the more inattentive kind, or it's a combined. The reason we want to know is so we can base treatment based upon what they're needing for their nervous system. The nervous system has three main categories, right? Interest-based, hyperarousal, and the rejection sensitivity, and they all play a really big role because their brain has this tendency of doing two things. Once they get going, it's like a turbo, they can't stop. They keep going, that hyperfocus, right? And they have a faulty brake, so they have a hard time stopping. So you have to remember that their brains will do that. So you have to find skill sets, you have to find modalities that's going to help them manage those symptoms. In the interest of time, I'm probably not going to cover all of these, but basically when you end up in a therapist office or a doctor's office, they're going to look to see which symptoms you have. And we don't have these symptoms in random. We have these 9 symptoms for both the inattentive kind and also the hyperactive kind. And you need to have 6 of the 9, or you'd have 6 of the 9 in both to meet the combined criteria. So when we say 6 of the 9, it means you need to have 6 out of these 9 categories to be diagnosed. And they have to be present in more than one environment. Meaning if they're only present at school, but you don't see any of them at home, then they don't meet this criteria. So they need to be present in at least 2 environments, home, school, work, home, whatever those 2 environments may be. For most kids, it's usually home and school. So what we do is we give a questionnaire to the parents. Then we also give a questionnaire to the teachers so they can assess to see what they're seeing in their classrooms, because they're going to see some things differently than you are. So we want to make sure that they're getting a most accurate diagnosis, because ADHD does not exist in isolation. If some of these symptoms are existing only in one environment and not a second, then we have to investigate what's happening in that environment that is making it difficult for your child. That it could be environment based. So in general, most of the ADD the inattentive category includes, having a hard time focusing, having a hard time turning in their homework or finishing to do the homework, having a hard time organizing things, sustaining attention, avoids doing things that are difficult, right? So ADD brain is an interest-based brain. So if they love doing math, they can do math without any issues, right? You give them a math homework, they're going to run through it. But if they don't like reading, you have them read even online, their brain's going to shut down. So that's one of the key things we always ask, right? What happens to you when you do something that you don't like to do? Like if you don't like to read, what do? Are you able to pick up an article, pick up a book, pick up a paragraph? Are you able to read it and follow it and remember it? Because a lot of times they're not able to. So we have to look at all of those factors. Are they distracted pretty easily? Are they forgetful in everyday life? Are they leaving their lunch boxes? Are they forgetting things? Are they losing things? It is not uncommon for somebody with ADHD to lose their things, right? Like if you go to any school, lost and found, you're gonna find a lot of forgotten lunch boxes, a lot of forgotten like jackets and caps and hoodies. I had one parent say at the beginning of the year, I don't just buy one lunchbox, I buy 4 because I know by the end of the year I'm going to use all 4 of them, because that's how many it takes to get us through the whole school year. I had this one mom, she labeled everything, right? Jackets, hats, with the child's name and phone number. Say, if lost, please call this number, because this child would leave everything and won't even remember that they lost their jacket, their gloves, their hats. They would be everywhere, playground, school, friends' homes, everything would get lost. It wasn't intentional, it's just they don't remember to pick up those things, they just forget. In the hyperactivity, again, you need 6 of those 9 and at least 2 of the environments, right? They are the ones that are a little bit more fidgety. right? They're the ones who are tapping their feet, or they're squirming in their seats. They have a hard time staying seated. When the teacher asks them a question, they can't wait to answer, like they're jumping up and down with their hands up in the air. Like they need to just have this energy. They just cannot sit and play quietly. It's just too difficult. If you give them a book to read, they're going to read for like a minute or two. Then it has to be read out loud or danced or something. They cannot sit. It would feel as if they are on this high battery, high energy mode. Like you'll hear words like they're driven by a motor. They come in, it feels like a tornado went through my house. They come in, they threw their backpack in one corner, their gloves are here, their shoes are here, and they took out their toys and they took out this. Like they can't sit still even for a little moment. So what do you do if your child does get diagnosed with ADHD? There are many things you can do, right? We talk about medication. It is the first line of defense for many people. Some people want to put it off, I understand that. So there are many other things you can do as well, which we'll talk briefly in here. Basically, ADHD medications are there two kinds, stimulants and non-stimulants. And there are different people who start them at different ages. Some may start in elementary, middle, high, or even adulthood. That decision to start when and how is something you should discuss with your physician, right? So I recommend if you're suspecting it, do get them assessed. There are many benefits of getting them assessed early. One of them is if you get them assessed early, even if you don't get the ADHD medications right now in elementary or middle school, what you can do is for school is you can get a 504 plan, which means they fit the criteria for accommodations. Meaning if they have a hard time finishing a task because they can't get their work in, they can get extra time to finish an exam. That could be part of their accommodations. If they have a hard time remembering to write down their assignments, their teacher would put it in their 504 that somebody has to check their assignment book, make sure that they wrote it down. Some kids have a hard time. They may do the work, but they will forget to turn it in the next day. So part of that 504 would mean if you have one with the schools is they'll check to see if they had turned in their work. They'll remind them. If some kids have a hard time sitting in the back of the classroom, let's suppose their last names are towards the end of the alphabet, so they may get like the back of the room seat, and they're going to get distracted with everybody, right? They're like a bunch of kids in front of them doing stuff. They're going to be looking at them and not looking at the teacher. So a part of that 504 accommodation would mean they're going to sit at the front of the classroom. And the teachers may use really silent, nonverbal cues to keep them in focus, right? They may touch their arm, hey, Muhammad, let's get back to task, right? They may come up with their own cues to help them stay on task. So even with the diagnosis, you can get access to a lot of those programs within the school system. And with the medications, like I said, there are two kinds. There are stimulants and non-stimulants. Non-stimulants are the secondary option because it doesn't really work with everybody, but the reason they're prescribed is because some kids have a negative side effects with the stimulants. And stimulants can be one that you take just once a day, like long-term acting, or they could be short acting, meaning you have to take them maybe once, twice, or 3 times a day. Which one is the right one? That's what gets to be determined by a child and adolescent psychiatrist. That's what the assessment is necessary to make sure that you're on the right medication, on the right dosage, and there are many different kinds of medications. So ensuring that you're on the right one is really necessary. You can also do a lot with nutrition, right? So the reason I say that is a diet that is high on vegetables, unprocessed grains, and lean meat is much better for their emotional health and their attention span versus a diet that is full of processed carbs. So a protein triggers alertness. Carbohydrates trigger drowsiness in general for everybody. But if somebody has a nervous system that is already struggling with attention span, a diet that is high on carbs is going to make it much more difficult for them. So consider, when you're giving them their breakfast and lunch, consider, especially for school, even in the evening time, consider giving them something that is protein-based, unprocessed carbs, vegetables. That's going to help with their system to pay attention a little bit better. It won't make it all gone, but it might give them some tools to handle it better. Proteins will do that for them. So think about what you can do in terms of their diet, right? If it's a diet, if you're giving them like cereal and something like that, maybe consider giving them something protein-based. Exercise, same thing. Exercise gives us these amazing endorphins and dopamine, which actually helps them with attention, focusing, and emotional management. So maybe consider having some exercise routine in their everyday life. It doesn't have to be too much. You could just be biking around the block, for instance. It's been shown in research, kids who exercise even for 30 minutes before the beginning of the day, at the start of the day, helps them focus better in school. But I know many kids have a hard time getting up in the morning because sleep is an issue. So that might be a problem to get them up and going 30 minutes early to exercise. But think about, can you somehow find a way to incorporate even 5-10 minutes of it? If you live close enough, can you walk to school? Can you bike to school? Can you just even find a way to just, jump up and down in your own home before, as you're waiting for the bus? Is there some things you can do just to get some of that endorphins going, that dopamine going, that serotonin going, that's going to help them do better in school? Behavioral therapy can be really helpful. And you can even do parent training with your therapist as well at the same time. And that can be really helpful because parenting looks very different with somebody with ADHD than somebody without ADHD. So behavioral therapy would help your child learn ways to manage their own emotions. Maybe it would help them learn tools, how to balance some of the executive skill deficits, right? How do I start a task? How do I play and plan and execute something? And of course, keep in mind, it won't happen overnight. All right, so one thing to keep in mind is an ADHD child, in terms of their brain chemistry, is typically 3 years behind somebody that doesn't have ADHD. I'm gonna let that sink in for just a moment. They're 3 years behind in terms of their brain development, their neurological development, than somebody that's a neurotypical child. So you're asking a 10-year-old to do something with their 7-year-old brain. You're asking a 7-year-old to do something when their brain is at a 4-year-old. They're already doing a lot. That's why I'm saying they are hardworking. They don't give up. They are so diligent in trying to keep up with their peers when their brain is at a different level. So behavioral therapy can help them. And if you work with the therapist on parenting strategies, you can help. How do I parent a child that is neurodiverse? Meditation. Meditation is when you're able to sit for even a few moments and just be present for one thought or one breath, or for your breath, I should say, not one breath. And that is a very difficult thing to do for somebody with ADHD. So it cannot be done like 10 minutes at a time. It could just start off with just 30 seconds. But the reason we recommend that is because it's been shown in research when you do meditation, it helps lower anxiety, helps with attention span and focusing. So they're learning to be present for one thought. So you're sort of retraining your brain. And initially it is really hard. So I encourage people to do it as a family so they're not feeling as if it's just me and not anybody else is doing it. There are amazing apps online. You can just Google YouTube. There are amazing mindfulness activities just geared towards kids that you can really practice. And just start off maybe just 30 seconds or a minute or two, not more. And as you build to that, it becomes more habit, it becomes more routine. Then you can add on more minutes together as a family or as, as just parent and child, if other kids are not able to be a part of it. So it becomes a family thing and you're teaching them. We're just helping us all do something different for our brains. And meditation is helpful for anybody, no matter if they have any kind of diagnosis or not. It's just been shown to help with attention span, focusing, and emotional regulation for all of us. So what do we do as a parent, right? So the first thing we have to remember, punishment doesn't work. Yelling, screaming, taking privileges away, it does nothing to them because their brains are wired differently. The nervous system is different. Their nervous system is more present for the present than for the past or the future. So they're not thinking about consequences. They're not thinking, oh, if I don't do my homework, what's going to happen? They're not thinking that far ahead. They don't have that maliciousness, right? They're just not thinking. Their brain isn't able to think that far. They're only looking at, oh, this is fun to do right now. That's why punishment doesn't work. So we have to think about discipline, right? Discipline means having to work with them to teach them something. It's not to punish. And their brains are interest-based. So what works for them is a reward system. So what we consider like a token economy or a chips economy, because they're going to be interest-based, pleasure-based, and that's going to get them excited. So if you think about what is going to get them excited, as anybody when they get something, a reward. So in elementary schools, when the child comes home, what do you see on their homework most of the time? Bunch of stickers. Teachers are awesome at it, right? They're rewarding your kids every day, all day long. They're using these systems in place. They use stickers all day. Child does something great. A lot of them would have charts. You get 10 stickers, you get to wear a special hat, right? They're using these systems to help manage and organize their classrooms. We can use the same systems at home. So you can use the token economy. Every time they do something great, you notice it, you give them a little token, you give them a little sticker, you give them a chip of some kind. Doesn't have to be expensive, just little things that makes them know that you're recognizing their hard work. So for them, praise goes a really long way. And with praise, you just have to remember one thing. You cannot combine praise with being and praise for doing. So I'm going to give you an example. So praise for being is, I love you. I am so proud of you. You're so amazing. Praise for doing is, you did such a great job. You put the dish in the sink today. You did your homework today. That is awesome, right? Two different things. When you combine them, you may say, oh, I love you. You're a good boy. You're a good girl because you did the homework. You just combine those two. Imagine how they would feel if they didn't do the homework. I'm not a good boy. I'm not a good girl. My mom doesn't love me. My dad doesn't love me. So we don't want to combine the two. We want to keep it separate because, as I had mentioned earlier, they have a higher sensitivity to rejection. So they take it much more seriously. They have a huge impact. They get filled with shame and feelings of inadequacy really quick. So we want to praise their being and we have to praise their behavior, but we don't combine the two. I would recommend this for any child, no matter if they have ADHD or not. We don't combine the two together. So praise, praise, praise. So when you want to see a behavior, you become sort of like a detective, right? You be a detective. You're not judging. You're looking. You're looking. You're looking. You're like always on the lookout. Every time you see something good that you see, you praise. You praise their behavior. You let them know. And the more you praise, the more that habit is going to become internalized. It's going to become repetitive. It's going to get established, right? Because you see them doing something and every child wants that approval from mom and dad and they're getting it from you. They want more of that. Every child wants recognition and they'll do whatever they can to get it, whether it's positive recognition or negative. So why not make it negative? Recognize when they're doing good versus recognizing when they're doing bad. Because if you recognize the bad behavior, you're going to get more of that because they just got acknowledgement and recognition. They got seen for that. So see them for the good. So even for the simplest thing, hey, you put your backpack in the right place. Thank you so much. That was awesome, right? Do it every time, right? And the more you do it, like I said, the more that behavior is going to become part of what they're doing. And once that behavior gets established, then you can step back, right? Then you can just do them sporadic, which we call intermittent reinforcement, which is extremely powerful because then you don't have to give them a cheering, like to be the cheerleader every time. You can just do it once in a while, but that would be enough to sustain it, to maintain it, because you're still getting recognition, but maybe not it's once every third time or every fourth time, but you're still maintaining that behavior by that praise, by that acknowledgement. And in the process, what you're doing is you're letting them know that they are unique, that they are capable. You're giving them a better sense of who they are, giving them the ability to help them overcome those challenges that are part of the nervous system. Also, ADHD brains tend to really respond to structure and routine, right? What that means is if you go to any elementary school, stickers are one thing you see all over. The other thing you see in a teacher's classroom is they have a routine for the day, and it's written out, and they follow it from the moment of the very first day, right? If you go after a month or two, you don't even tell the kids, they'll know exactly where their backpack, where their lunches go, where their jackets go, when they sit down, what book to take out. They do it automatically because the teachers have done it in the same sequential way every single day. They respond, every child responds to that. But an ADHD brain really responds because they're hyper aroused. They don't know how to contain it. So when they're giving that structure by you, they respond really well. And if you give them with transitions, just like a teacher does in school, they respond well to that as well. Hey, in 10 minutes, we are going to go from homework time to playing outside. So let's just try to catch up with our homework. We'll finish the rest later, right? Hey, 5 more minutes, 3 more minutes, 2 more minutes. Their system gets ready and they're able to transition much more easily without getting hyper aroused at that moment. So structure and routine. So doing the same things in the same sequence around the same time period. Meaning it gets to be like a predictable schedule. They come home, they put their backpack away, they eat a snack. I'm just making up a random schedule. They have some free time to do something. Then they do their homework. Then they do dinner. Then they have free time. Then it's bath and bedtime, right? Whatever the structure may be, you do the same sequence around the same time period. You do that enough times, their system gets to be a little bit calmer knowing what's coming next. So the transitions are easier and their system gets to be a little bit more calmer. So first of all, we have to recognize that their systems are different. It's a psychological, physiological, medical different. And we have to be cognizant of that. I'm just going to go over the last 3 on that slide, which is how do you prep your child that's going to help you? How do you prep yourself and how do you remap your own parenting? So what I mean by that is prepping your child is when something isn't going right. You can't bring it up when things are a little bit more high in intensity at home, right? You can't bring it up when you're angry. You have to find that peaceful moment with your child. That's what the P is in your prep your child. It has to be a peaceful child so they can understand what you're talking about. Because when things are not calm, their system, which is always hyper aroused, is going to get even more aroused. Then you're going to ask, the R is request. You're going to request that behavior, meaning, hey, when you come home from school, can you put your backpack here? Right? You're going to request for that. You're going to give them guidance. You're going to let them choose. You say, and they're going to ask them, what else can you do instead? Hey, when you came home and you threw your backpack in the middle of the hallway, can you do something else instead? Where can we put it in? Where it would make sense for you? You're going to make them part of the solution at that moment. And then you're going to listen for an explanation, the E, from your child, right? It means you have to be a little bit more open-minded. You have to sort of ask, why did this happen, right? How come we didn't do your homework today? You have to understand because their minds are interest-based, but every day, some moments, they are able to refocus really well. That hyper-focusing comes in place. So we understanding what didn't work in those moments, so you can help them find solutions. So find an explanation, help understand. Oh, I had a really hard time starting how to write the first sentence, so I can start my paragraph. Oh, that makes sense. So let's think about ways, what kind of things can we do that would help you write that first sentence, right? What are some strategies that we can use? Maybe you would need to enlist help of a teacher, yourself, or somebody else to help your child come up with some solutions. And then the P in that child part is praise. You praise, praise, praise. There's not enough praise out there, right? There's one family therapist that a child needs about 12 indications of love in a given day. Sorry about that. So whether it's by physical touch or by verbal recognition. So praise, praise, praise. So prep yourself, right? Prep is before something is being said or done by you, you take a pause. Pause, take a breath, drink a glass of water, get some fresh air, because it is difficult as a parent when your child is misbehaving or is not listening to you, or some of their tendencies are getting to be a little difficult. You are going to have a hard time. So give yourself a break and pause before you say or do something. And make sure you are recharging. It means you're taking care of yourself, self-care, whatever that may look like. whatever you have to do to make sure that you have the energy, because it does take a lot of energy out of a parent to do what you have to do. It is a lot. So make sure that you are taking care of yourself. And then E is you have to evaluate the situation. Evaluate what was happening with an open mind, looking at it from your child's perspective, looking at it from a perspective that your child has a neurodiverse nervous system, has their brain chemistry is different. They're not thinking and looking at things the way you may be than they are. And then the P is then that's when you proceed. That's when you do the next thing. So the remapping for parenting is, again, you think about their R is to regard your child with unconditional love, knowing that this is not their fault. When I didn't talk about this, I'm going to just briefly say the causes of ADHD. People don't really know what causes it. What they do know is there's a huge genetic component. It runs in families. So you're born with it, just like you may be born with a tendency to wear glasses, or a tendency of, how tall you're going to be, or the tendency of, medical conditions like cholesterol and blood pressure. This is the same thing. It tends to run in families. So you have to regard your child is unconditional love. It is not their fault that they have it. They got it from someplace in their genes, from somebody in your family. It is not their fault. It's a brain difference. It's a their nervous system is different. E is externalize the behavior. So remembering it is not them, it is not their fault, it is caused because of how their brain and the nervous system is different. They are not doing this on purpose. Their intention is completely different. They want to please you, they want to make you happy. It's just they're struggling with certain parts of things in life because they don't know how to do things differently. And then M and the A is mistakes acceptance. Learning to accept their mistakes, knowing that they are going to make tons and tons of mistakes, but it's better to make them at home with you to support them than to make them in a place where it could be unsafe. And learning that with your guidance, they can learn from those mistakes now than later in life. And then P again is praise. We cannot emphasize praise enough. They respond so much to praise and acknowledgement. So learning to do that more and more. There are tons of resources. I've only listed a couple up here. One of them is Chat. They have tons of, they used to have support groups as well for parents in addition to adults and kids. And then ADD.org, they also have tons of resources as well. If you go to any library, they will have tons of books on ADHD. I forgot to write this one. There is a online resource. They have tons of great articles. It is called Attitude, ADDI. TUDE, just like attitude, but with ADD.com. It's a magazine, tons of resources, tons of videos, tons of webinars. Information is out there. So I hope that you guys will be able to reach for this information. If you have any questions for those, of course, if you have any questions for me, you have my contact email. You're welcome to reach out, and I'll try to connect you with whatever resources are in your area. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Madiha. This was an amazing program. I'm going to open it up that if we have any questions, please go ahead and write it in the question box. I'll be able to read it out. If not, then inshallah we'll wrap it up. Sister Madiha, there was one question that says, what does ADHD stand for?
Oh my goodness, I forgot to even cover that. My mistake. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. My mistake. That should have been the first thing I should have said.
Okay, alhamdulillah, I'm glad that was taken care of. Any other questions do we have? If not, I have a question. So the hardest part that I see with navigating ADHD is unfortunately the school systems that we are dealing with, and it's very grade based, right? You got to take a test, you got to pass it, and you get a number. Obviously, we understand, as you just mentioned, that a lot of these children, they have creativity, or they will focus on something and excel in it, whether that be mathematics, whether that be reading, whether that be writing, but it's just maybe that's one area where they excel in. How, as parents, can we navigate this feeling of failure when your child is not doing well in school? Like, we understand the child, but it's just like, how can we reorient ourselves?
Absolutely. That's why I think it's a great question. And you're right. It is, the school system isn't designed for something like that, right? Even if you don't like math, you have to do the math, right? It's not an option, it's just required. So it is very difficult for kids that have ADHD to do things that they have no interest in. So we have to find ways to make it interesting for those kids in some way, in some capacity, whatever that may be. So so in those moments, it is always good to enlist the teacher's help, especially when they're younger. How can we make this more interesting for them? Could they do a little bit more hands-on activity to learn the basic math facts? Can they read the question? If they have a hard time focusing on reading, that could be part of that 504 plan. If you have a diagnosis, schools. So I don't know if you guys know about 504s. 504s are oh my goodness, my mind just went blank on the accommodations. Accommodations the school has to provide for certain diagnoses. ADHD is one of those diagnoses. So if somebody has the diagnosis, the school, if you say, I want to get accommodations for my child, they have ADHD, what they will do is they will do a study, which could take several months, meaning they will have their school psychologist do an assessment. They're going to have them observe your child in a classroom setting. They're going to have a reading specialist observe their reading. They're going to have a math specialist observe their other like educational abilities. So they're going to have a comprehensive testing done in school. Even if we had testing done outside of school, they will do one for in school to substantiate that diagnosis and to find out what they're needing. And based upon that, they can again get accommodations. So if your child is struggling with math and they're needing some extra help, they could be assigned extra help for math during the school day. If they're struggling with reading, they could be assigned a reading specialist to help them read. So they get that one-on-one, and we know with kids, if it's one-on-one, their attention is going to be a little bit easier. You can grab it a little bit more easier. It can be more like, and they can get that more reward system going. So schools can help out a lot if you ask them for those resources, but you have to ask. Some teachers may say, I've heard of them, like they'll make the accommodation even if they don't have a 504. So they'll say, you know what, my child has this, but I don't think I need all the accommodations at this time. He's only in first, second grade, but could you help him with this? And they will do that. Many teachers are very open to helping the child. They want the child to succeed, and they will accommodate and try to help your child succeed in the best way they know how, based upon what they're needing. So I would recommend connecting to the teachers of your classroom for your home. For every the state has a different name for basically your child's class, and connecting with them to get the best access to services. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Jazakallah khair. I have, a few comments saying thank you so much. This is exactly what we needed. This session was recorded. You would be able to share this. It's going to be available on YouTube, so you can go ahead and do that. Then there's one question that's saying, what age is usually ADHD diagnosed?
Elementary. That's the earliest, about 6, 7. Nothing before, because they can't really tell if they're that early on. So usually around first, second grade, not maybe kindergarten. I've seen some cases, but usually around first, second grade. So around 8, 7 seems to be like 6 and 7. Seems to be the most age, but some kids don't get diagnosed till later. It doesn't mean they cannot have access to services. They can, but sooner you can get them diagnosed, sooner you can get them services, even if it's not medication. Medication is one route, and many kids and adults benefit from that, right? But I understand you may not want to put a 6-year-old on medications, but you can still get them services from school. And one thing to also keep in mind, I want you to think about long term, right? Even if they get accommodations now, because they've had accommodations in school, they can qualify for accommodations in college as well, because it's established pattern then. So I want you to think about what are they going to be needing, not just in 5th grade or in 7th grade, but are they going to need additional help when they go to college when the structure isn't there? And if they have a 504 in high school, they can get a 504 in college as well at that time.
Okay, awesome. All right. So this was actually a good question, and then we're going to wrap it up with this. Is that if the child is in a private school, so let's say Islamic school or otherwise, how would I get them diagnosed other than through school? Would the primary physician should do that, or is there any other specific specialist?
If a primary care, I wouldn't recommend, because some of primary cares are really good at it and some may need more. So many times I recommend is if you're not sure if a child has an ADHD, you can take them to a primary care and they'll do some initial testing. And then if you need additional testing, you can then take them to a psychiatrist, child and adolescent psychiatrist. It doesn't mean to take the medications, or you can even do something called a neuropsych eval, which is usually a pretty lengthy evaluation. It takes about 2 sessions, so 2 different days, full day of testing, and they can do a really thorough exam. Most insurances will cover a neuropsych exam, and you can get a pretty good assessment and a pretty good diagnosis with that as well. So even if somebody's in a private school, most of the diagnosis tends to happen outside of school.
All right, Jazakallah khair. That is all for today. Alhamdulillah. Thank you again, Sister Madiha. We have a few parents asking for your contact information. If you would like to provide
You can
your
contact
business. Yeah.
Yeah, you can connect me to my email, which is Madiha, my name, MADIHA, at inner, INNER, peace, PEACE, therapies, THERAPIES.com. So Madiha at innerpeacetherapies.com. You're welcome to connect with me. I'll do my best to answer or give you resources and connect you to the proper places.
Thank you again, Sister Madiha. So inshallah khair, we're going to wrap it up with Surah Al-Asr. And thank you again all for joining us on our parent talk with MCNA. We are looking forward to have many more different programs such as this. Inshallah khair, follow us on social media. You'll be able to get the first dibs on what programs we have. Register, and please share this. This is a free service that we are providing for parents in our Muslim community that we can all benefit from. Once again, her email was madiha at innerpeacetherapies.com, inshallah. All right, so I'm going to end with Surah Al-Asr. It is, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Good night.